Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads. All right, welcome to the Drum Shuffle, episode number 3. I'm Jamie Eads. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate you listening. I hope you find all of our episodes entertaining and useful. You can, as always, reach us at the drumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find me over at jamieeads.com. Our guest today is one of the most technically proficient drummers you'll ever hear, Travis Orbin from the band Darkest Hour. He is also a fantastic solo artist in his own right. He also spent some time playing in Periphery. This guy is simply unbelievably talented. I mean, some of the things he does is absolutely supernatural on the drums. He has a very unique playing style. You'll hear us talk a little bit about that. Darkest Hour about to hit the road. You'll hear us talk about that as well, along with his fantastic solo release that came out in December of 2017 called Silly String 2, and I would like to let you hear just a little bit of that right now. So you can certainly see what I'm talking about, the technical proficiency of our guest today. Please welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Travis Orbin. Travis, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Hey, really want to thank you for joining us here on the Drum Shuffle podcast.
Happy to be a part of it.
Great. So, Travis, I'm going to start at the beginning. I like to do that with my guests. Tell us a little bit about how you became a drummer and any formal education that you've had, etc.
Okay, well, I didn't really experience a musical upbringing. Like, there weren't instruments being played in the house, but my parents were consumers of music and different styles. My dad liked a lot of rock and classic rock, and my mom listened to a lot of Motown. So there was a little bit of variety, which was nice. And I don't know, I always had some sort of an interest in percussion because I was always sort of aimlessly beating on desks as a child in school. And then I heard Metallica's And Justice for All. And then out of nowhere, I began to mimic the motions of a drum set player.
Sure.
And so my parents started me off sort of slow. Like, they got me a practice pad and then a really cheap little synthesizer kit just to see if there was a genuine interest there. And I wore those things out. And then finally in 1995, for my Christmas and birthday gift, my birthday falls dangerously close to Christmas, I was given a Pearl Export drum set and 2 Zildjian Amir cymbals and a cooler as a throne.
So you were rocking the Igloo cooler to sit behind your new kit.
Yeah, yep. Drummer edition Igloo cooler.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'm sure the endorsement applications are flying out the door already.
Oh, I can't wait to see.
So, I have to ask, because folks that are familiar with your playing, first of all, I do want to say that you are one of the most talented drummers that I have ever seen in my 30 plus years of being around drummers.
Damn. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I mean, just the technical proficiency and your and we'll talk here in just a second about your practice routine, because I know that it's well known that you spend hours and hours practicing your craft. But anybody that has gone out and just done a quick search for Travis Orbin and pulled up any of your YouTube videos will immediately see that your setup is very unique. It is, and your style is very unique in that you play open-handed for the most part. You don't have a rack tom for the most part. So when you got this first drum set in 1995, are you ambidextrous? When you played baseball, were you left and right-handed? How did that kind of evolve? Did you start out that way, or is it something that just kind of happened over time?
Yeah, it definitely didn't start that way. I've always been a right-handed person, and acted accordingly throughout my life. Eating dinner with my right hand, brushing my teeth, etc. So I played a conventional setup for a while, and I began to flirt with open-handed playing in when I was still in high school, so like late '90s. And I was still playing the conventional kit. I was just leading with the left hand on the hi-hat. And it was 2004, I think. I showed up to a gig with a really heavy technical band I was in at the time, and we showed up so late I was literally taking my drums out of the bags and throwing them on stage. So on a whim, I opted to play with a three-piece kick, snare, floor tom, and I rather liked it. It was challenging and stimulating, but I wanted to add something on the left to promote more left-hand movement. And that's basically how it came to be, the drums at least. Now the cymbals, I guess they're a separate story, but even with that setup, I was still playing more of a conventional cymbal setup, and I was still kind of switching between open-handed and conventional playing, kind of like what Dennis Chambers does. And then in 2005, I joined a pop band I was replacing a drummer who had already tracked their EP, and the drums were pretty simple. So I figured I'd challenge myself further, and I basically integrated the setup that you see now in all of my videos. And I started using my left foot more because double bass playing became more of an interest to me as my interest in Virgil Donati grew and grew and grew and flourished. And yeah, there's a lot of different factors culminating in that evolution. It wasn't an overnight thing.
Well, I will tell you this. I speak for all drummers everywhere. We are all envious as anything of your ability with the left side of your body, as a right-handed guy. I'm just simply stupefied when I watch your playing and what you can do. I mean, the speed is there on both sides of your body, and it just when I watch you playing, it seems like it's effortless for you. If I were trying to pull off some of the stuff that you're doing, I would definitely be sweating, and it would probably look like I was having convulsions. So, so we're all envious of that. No doubt about it. But it is a very unique setup. It's a very unique style that you play. And, clearly the technical prowess and proficiency that you have came from someplace. And I promised that we would talk a little bit about your practicing habits. So, in 95, you've got this drum set. Did you pretty much just lock yourself in your practice space for the next 5 years, or what? Tell us how you became the drummer you are today?
Yeah, I basically attached a leash to the drum set, and my mom would come in intermittently with gruel. No. um, Now I played to the radio for the most part, which was pretty happening at the time. 95, you know, you had all that last great wave of American rock music, and it was big fun. And then I stuck with it for a year, and my parents realized that it definitely was not a passing phase, and they got me formal lessons, private lessons with a tutor that is still to this day teaching. He's about an hour north of me in Dover, Delaware, or Felton, Delaware, and his name is Honey Bochelle, and he taught me a lot of the fundamentals, most importantly, how to read. And from there, after I graduated high school, I would I stuck with him for several years, but then I kind of branched out and, you know, embarked on my own path of autodidactism and started buying texts that interested me and videos. And there was a pretty big phase in like 2004, 2005, where I kind of revamped my technique and started throwing more from the wrist and not really utilizing fingers, and started really delving into Mike Mangini's Rhythm Knowledge books, which hopefully they're back on the market. They've been off for some time now, but there are some systems in there that are pretty fascinating. So I started delving more into like odd tuplets and timing, those sorts of things, polyrhythmically against different parts of my body. And then I was also like, you know, checking out Virgil's crazy pattern-esque stuff and Marco Miniman's extreme interdependent stuff, and absorbing all different styles of music. So coming out of high school, it was like almost another, you know, decade of formative learning.
Well, I mean, you certainly picked some great guys to you know, to look at. You know, you mentioned Marco, you mentioned Virgil, you mentioned Mike Mangini. You know, anybody that knows anything about drumming will know that those guys are drum gods.
Oh yeah, freaks.
They are freaks, and it's, you know, I mean, it when I see any of those guys play, it's superhuman ability. It really is.
Yeah.
So you mentioned those guys as influences. You also mentioned earlier, you know, a Metallica record. So, you know, kind of package everything up. Tell us the guys that really influenced your playing, if there's anything to add to the ones we've already mentioned.
I also mentioned Dennis Chambers. He was a big one. He was like the first drum VHS I ever bought was Serious Moves by Dennis Chambers, and to this day, it's like probably my favorite drum video. And
I've got that one too in my library. I think everybody does. Yeah,
it's so fantastic.
It is.
He's such a monster, and it's also great to see him out and playing again as well. But that was my first, I guess, super drummer influence. But prior to that, it was Lars and a lot of those radio rock bands, you know, like Matt Cameron from Soundgarden. I guess you could say even Trey Cool from Green Day and Chad Sexton from 311. I mean, Adrian Young from No Doubt. All those people that were kind of came into the American rock zeitgeist, I guess, were little influences. But yeah, Lars was a big one because obviously he propagated the whole me wanting to be a drummer. And then
Sure.
But yeah, the bigger names that I guess are more recognized by the drumming community would be Virgil, Mike, Dennis, Vinny Colaiuta was a pretty big one, and David Garibaldi from Tower of Power was pretty huge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you know, and I think a lot of folks will notice that you're mentioning guys that are on the harder side of the equation. And you know, your band that you're currently, I guess you guys are about to hit the tour circuit, hitting the road next week. Darkest Hour. I mean, it's very heavy music. You know, and you spent some time in Periphery as well. But, and we'll talk about those if you'd like, but I certainly want to mention your solo record that came out a couple of months ago, called Silly String 2. It's not a metal record. It's not heavy music. I would describe it as avant-garde or kind of new age, but we can definitely hear the jazz influence in your playing on that record, and it's just a fantastic listen. So, for our listeners that know you from the heavier music, I certainly want to point them towards that record. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that project and how you approach the playing on it?
Thanks for all the kind words. Yeah, as far as I guess I didn't really mention any jazz guys, but I mean, I absolutely love the Time Out record by Dave Brubeck Quartet. I really got into Miles. I bought a ton of Miles records at one point, John Coltrane. So those guys, those monoliths, are they all kind of seep into my subconscious, and I guess it comes out and expresses itself or manifests itself, depending on the music, the vehicle that is that I'm working on at the moment. But as far as Silly String 2, that started back in, I think it was April of 2014. I just started this crazy composition spree. I would just write one song after another. And I don't know where it was coming from, but I was writing every day and enjoying it greatly. And at some point I was writing two different kinds of songs. I was writing kind of busier instrumental stuff, and then writing stuff that it was still diverse, but I guess fell more under the radar of or under the guise of alternative rock, and it had vocal parts. So I figured at some point I would write a full length, which would be my first, half of it being instrumental and half of it being songs with vocal parts. But I was writing so much material and amassing so much that I had enough. Before I knew it, I had enough to put out two full lengths, one of which ended up being Silly String 2, and the other is another entire full length comprised of songs with vocal parts. So Silly String 2, I started composing it in, I guess it was April of 2014 or May, thereabouts, and I finished the last song in January of 2015. But as I said, I was writing other songs for other releases inadvertently, not knowing at the time.
Sure.
So that was just the composition process. And then by the time I had enough free time, I didn't have any obligations, I started tracking the drums. And I think it was August of last year. So it came, actually after I finished tracking the drums, it came together quite quickly, probably even quicker than the composition side. But yeah, so I tracked the drums, and then I hired this absolutely inhuman bass player named Cameron.
Yeah, it shows on the record too.
Yeah, he plays anything that I throw at him, and he can play even crazier stuff on top of it sometimes. But his name is Cameron McClellan, and he tracked all the bass except for the one song called A Slightly Unfinished Sound, which is upright bass, actual upright bass. I was fortunate to find an upright bass player with the aid of a friend. And but other than him, John Sims is his name, Cameron tracked all the bass. And while he was tracking his bass, Adam Edgemont did all the guitars. And then geez, I don't know. I'd have to find a CD and look at the credits because there's so many people on there. But that's the basic gist of how it came about. After I tracked everything, it was kind of assembly line, like everyone else did their thing.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a really good release, and I would encourage everybody to definitely check it out. Just simply because it is so different than what we're accustomed to from you in terms of style. There was another EP at some point that I came across And you mentioned your drum teacher earlier, your instructor, and I always giggle because there's a track on that EP called "What Do You Want From Me," and
Oh yeah.
it's a voicemail that starts the song. It says, "Hi, this is Travis, drum instructor. I hope you like it. If you don't, what do you want from me?" Which I thought was, I laugh every time I hear it. Tell us a little bit about that project as well.
Okay. Well, real quick, my first three releases, Projects, Silly String, and Projects 2, I wanted to sort of give a little bit of a shout out to uh, basically they're my three biggest influences in this whole thing, because without my parents and without my drum instructor, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. So wanted to give them their due, I guess.
Absolutely.
So Projects 2, that was actually part of that composition spree that I mentioned earlier. I was writing, like I said, the busier instrumental stuff, and I put out Projects 1 in September of 2014, and it was kind of weird. The night or the day after I put it out, I woke up and I had this vision in my head of like a burning notebook, which was like the notebook that's on the cover of Projects.
Absolutely.
And it just hit me, let's do a sequel. So I started writing 3 songs, and then I paired them with 2 other songs that I had written in the midst of that composition spree. And because they kind of had that more, I don't know, atonal metal vibe that Projects emits. So yeah, I tracked the drums, basically the same thing as Silly String 2. I tracked the drums, and then Adam Edgemont did guitars, and Cameron did the bass.
Well, both of them are just so incredible. I was as I was preparing for our interview, I was watching some of the Projects 2 stuff, the videos last night on YouTube, and I don't know if you're playing to a click or what. I don't know. First of all, I don't know how you would program a click for some of the time signature stuff that you were doing. But it's just, to me, again, I go back to the technique and the technical proficiency. It kind of seems inhuman to me as a player. I'm a groove guy, and I think probably a lot of our listeners are groove guys, and we watch guys like you play, and we go, gosh, how's he doing that? So kudos to you. And that kind of leads me and segues into, your full-time band that you're playing in, Darkest Hour. Just some amazing drumming on those records, and I certainly want you to talk a little bit about your all's latest release and the tour that's coming up. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with Darkest Hour right now.
Okay, well, I joined the band, and officially in I think it was either April or May of 2013, and we put out our first record, which was self-titled. The following summer, I think it was June of 2014, and then we did a little 7-inch EP, which was 2 covers, one being a Judas Priest cover and the other a Minor Threat. Put that out. I don't even know what the official release date of that was. I think it was sometime in 2016. I know we tracked it in around October of 2015. And then this most recent album, a full length, it's called Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora, and that was released in March of 2017. And did a lot of touring last year, a lengthy US tour and a lengthy European tour. And this is basically just a continuation of that. We're trying to hit as many markets that we haven't before the album accrues too many miles.
Sure.
Or we have to, lock ourselves back into the writing space. And we're touring, doing a little jaunt starting next week. And then in April, we have another European tour with Havoc. who we've toured with in the past, well, last year. And then I'm not sure what we're going to do. I don't know, it depends on the offers that come our way, and whether or not it's worth entertaining or if we should just focus on writing.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, that kind of brings me back to some of the solo project. Are there any aspirations for the Silly String 2 guys to take that show out on the road at all, or what's next after your tour with Darkest Hour?
I have I've seen interest online for me playing this stuff live, but I really don't see how it would work logistically without me burying myself in financial debt. Because there's just so much that goes into touring. It's unreal. And also, I mean, I guess I could just play the tracks, but that's more of like a clinic thing, a clinic setting. So I would prefer to just wait until I have some sort of maybe a clinic tour or something to present it in that setting. But that is, that's an interest of mine. I would like to do that. But anyway, what's next is I actually just finished the drums for my next solo EP, which is going to be called Finite 2. It's a conceptual sequel to Finite. I don't know if you got time to check that one out.
Sure.
Okay. But yeah, I really, really love that one. And Finite 2, I'm probably most proud of this one, compositionally speaking. So I'm excited to see it come together. So I just finished the drums for that. And actually tonight I am tracking 2 songs for Adam Edgemont, his solo stuff. We work together quite extensively, as you can probably tell.
Absolutely.
He's a fantastic guitarist based out of Brooklyn. So I'm doing 2 songs. I'm actually going to do his whole 5-song EP, but I'm doing 2 tonight, and then that'll take me into the tour. And then when I get back from the tour, finishes 3 songs, and then I'm going to start working on the sound design and cover art for Finite 2. And then I'll be mixing that in Florida with the same guy I mixed Silly String 2 with in late March. And then that'll take me into April, where we have the European tour. So I'm pretty booked up for the next few months.
Booked up and busy, a drummer's dream, right?
Indeed.
Well, it brings up a good point, I think, in that, your output is fairly prolific. I think that's a a good word for it. You're constantly writing, you're playing with a bunch of different guys, at such a high level. Tell our listeners a little bit about how you get to that point, where you're constantly busy. Now, it's one thing to be a fantastic, great drummer and having a lot of calls, but you've really kind of taken the reins of your career and you write and come up with these things, and you're constantly releasing things. And you mentioned something that I want to key in on a little bit, that there's so much that goes into a tour, and financially it's hard to go out on the road as yourself when you're a drummer. Give the drummer some, I guess I would say. But, talk to us a little bit about taking control of your career as a drummer and writing and recording. What words of advice would you give, I suppose, is what I'm really trying to ask.
Well, I don't know. It's tough to say in this environment, because I feel like even today it's even easier than ever to kind of take the reins and build a name for yourself. But for me, I guess I had a bit of a stroke of luck in that I was involved with Periphery and Sky's Airplane, so I had a little bit of a driving force behind my name. So by the time I started regularly posting on YouTube, it wasn't entirely too difficult to, I guess, capture people's attention. So just by the sheer act of doing that, I kind of my name kind of fell into other people's radars, and I came to work with people like Adam and Cameron. Like I met Cameron when I did the intervals record, The Shape of Color. He's a co-producer and he played bass on that. So I met him when I went to Toronto to record my drum tracks for that. So I don't know. I think it's just, before you start posting a bunch of videos of yourself on Instagram, you should, really study your ass off and practice and kind of chip away at your identity and figure out what makes you unique and try to amplify that rather than, just posting the craziest lick that you can play or whatever.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, you really make a good point there. There are so many great, talented players out there that are just, sitting in their home studio. Technology has made it very easy, to buy a GoPro camera or a nice camera and do drum covers all day that sound good, and you post 30 or 40 of them a week, and but you kind of get lost in the shuffle with that.
The thing is, those people have always existed. It's just that now they have a vehicle to express it and have the world see it if they look hard enough, I guess.
Absolutely. And it is.
So now it's like, we have all these fantastic players who always existed, but I'm just, it's hard to find an original voice amidst all that clamor, Like I almost think that things were better when we were a little more insular and we didn't have all this access. But if you use it as a tool, I think it's a good resource.
It will absolutely. It can definitely raise your profile as a player, and you never know when somebody's going to see that. I mean, I think of Journey, I think of Judas Priest. Those were guys that kind of got discovered, through the band needing to replace a member and,
right.
Finding them online. And yeah, your phone can ring that way. But, you and I are about the same age, Travis, and, when we were kids growing up as, fresh musicians, it was this mysterious, magical thing. How do I get in a band and sign a record deal? And, I mean, there was so much mystery around it, and we used to wait with, bated breath. When is the next, Metallica record coming out, or whatever band it was that we were really following? Oh, they're in the studio right now. When is it going to come out? What's it going to sound like? And you kind of waited for MTV to put that first video out. Now, I think bands are, with the social media thing, I can tell you, what some drummers eat for lunch while they're in the studio recording their next record. I mean, it's like nothing is saved for the grand unveiling. Everything is just out there for us all the time, which I think is good and it's bad. So you make a really good point that it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, you got to love all that extraneous information. Like, I just changed heads. Here's the picture. Like, no, just track the song. No one cares. All right. Great,
right.
You got new heads. All right, lovely.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think we're all guilty of that to a certain extent. I mean, I will, as an example, when I'm getting ready to go in the studio and do a session with somebody, I'm on social media saying, "Can't wait to get in the studio next Thursday with X." We're all guilty of that, I think, because we like to have. First of all, we want to tell people what we're up to. Secondly, we like to have those likes and thumbs up and stars and all that stuff. On this show, I open and close every show by saying, please go out to iTunes or Stitcher and give us a rating. We're all, that's just the world we live in today.
Sure.
But
I prefer to see a distinction between here's what I ate for lunch and here's the cover art for my next album,
Absolutely. And, I mean, I think it's really cool that there are bona fide guys like yourself that are out there writing a ton of incredible material and releasing it to say, here's what I'm doing. So we thank you for your prolific output of just incredible stuff. It's fantastic.
Hey man, I'm fortunate to have garnered the fan base that I have. So thanks everyone for your ears.
Absolutely. Well, and speaking of which, tell our listeners where they can find all things Travis Orbin. Is there one spot or several? Tell us, where we can find Darkest Hour, Silly String 2. Where can we find you out there?
The easiest way is travisorbin.com. That's the hub. That will lead you to all my social media. And if you scour the news, there's all the super relevant press releases that I've done, like announcing Silly String 2, announcing the latest Darkest Hour album, etc.
Awesome. So we're going to encourage everybody to go out there and check all that stuff out. So that brings me to my next question. What are you doing in terms of publicity? Who is kind of managing all that stuff for yourself? Is that something that you're doing on your own, or do you have a team that's helping you manage that stuff? Because I get asked this question all the time. I have a website, and pretty much it's me and my wife that are taking care of all that stuff. But people ask me all the time, how do I keep up with that? So let us know how you're dealing with that stuff.
Oh, well, I'm entirely self-managed. I'm autonomous. I've always have been. I mean, I have people that help me, but I do all the social media stuff. My website is built by a friend of mine, Brian Seffer, who I've known for years. He was a fan of mine before he even built my site. But I mean, I try to do as much as I can, even down to every detail. I mean, I've done all my cover art, for example, for all the EPs and Silly String 2. I mean, I would mix the damn thing if I could, but there's only so many hours in the day, and I would prefer to have someone who has far more experience than I do. But I try to do as much as I can. So there's certainly not a team behind Travis Orbin. It's just Travis Orbin.
How much time does that take? I mean, I think some people don't understand what an undertaking it is to have several different projects going at once. I mean, I'm assuming it's a full-time job for you.
I don't know. No, I mean, it just depends on the project. It depends on how many people are involved, how much micromanagement I have to do. I mean, I still, even when I'm not on tour, I have a side job to this day. I help my mom with her business. So there are enough hours in the day, but it just, if you have to figure in, the point of diminishing returns, like if I spend all this time mixing my album, I could have been doing another project, for example. Right. But yeah, there's I don't know. It's just, you just have to apply yourself. And like I said, it depends on how many people are involved, and it depends on what you want to get across as well. How I would imagine that if you tracked all the drums yourself, and you just hired one person and they were dependable and competent, then it wouldn't drain much of your time, because they just turn over their tracks and you wouldn't have too much more work to do. But that's really the key. I guess that's one of the key factors, is finding competent, talented musicians or other people to work with, depending on what it is that you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And, I'm sure, with your playing ability, I'm sure you have a lot of calls that are coming in. Hey, can you do some drum tracks for me? Are you doing work like that as well? Kind of, tracking drums for folks and sending those off via email, or I guess what I'm getting at, do you say no a lot?
No, I never say no. I say yes to everything because everything's a new experience. I think you can pluck something to be learned from every experience, every job. So no, I don't think I've ever said no. and
And that's the point that I was trying to get at, because I knew what you were going to say there. It's, as musicians, we can't close any doors. That's my opinion anyway.
right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And yes, I do session work. I've been playing on people's material since I think 2007 is the first time I did it professionally, and I've been doing it professionally out of my home studio since 2010.
You've got a lot of work going on there as well, and just from viewing your videos and whatnot, you've got a pretty cool setup in terms of your studio that you're recording at. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, has that been kind of did you go out and spend a ton of money to have a great studio from day one, or has it been kind of a passion project over time?
It's been a passion project over time. I'm fortunate that my studio is on my parents' property. My father built a separate compound next to the house that has a traditional garage, my mother's business, and it started as just kind of a raw space. Like my dad, he's a little bit of a pack rat. He put a bunch of junk in here, and it was just my drum kit, and I would just come in here and let loose. And then over time, I cleared some of it out. I laid some hardwood floors. My dad helped me with drywall and painting and a drop ceiling, and then I started investing into audio gear, and that came about as an interest because of my friend Taylor Larson, who's now a successful producer engineer himself, and the bug bit him many years prior, and he started persuading me to invest in the stuff. So that started in 2007. I began investing in audio gear, and it's just amassed and grown ever since.
That's the way it always works. You find something to spend money on gear wise, and it just continues to grow. And we joke and say all musicians have gas, and people think you're talking about digestive problems, but it's gear acquisition syndrome. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
we've all got it, and we all do it for sure. But you have a beautiful space, and you're getting some great sounds out of there. Now, do you share that space at all, or is that specifically for Travis?
Oh no, this is all me. I couldn't imagine sharing this with anyone.
Okay, so I can't rent your studio for my next project. That's what you're telling me.
I mean, you can come in here and you can track drums, but you're not going to be able to move the drums around because the mics are set up and they're not moving.
A man after my own heart.
Start shedding the Orbinator setup now.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't know that I could sit down and do anything musical behind your kit, because it is very unique, and it's awesome. Travis, one final thing. We try to do this with all of our guests, and I guess we kind of scratched the surface with it just a little bit earlier, but what advice would you give to somebody listening to the show today? Obviously we all aspire to be better players, and you're on a level that is, it's stupefying, quite honestly, some of the stuff that you can do behind the kit. But, share your advice for drummers, no matter where they're at in their career. Any just really good words of advice on navigating the business or becoming a better player. Share your knowledge with us.
Well, initially, I would, like I said, study your ass off, practice hard as you can, find a competent teacher, and the more education that you acquire, and the more you know about just what you're playing, how to play with a click, all the basic stuff, the better off you're going to be. And as far as the business thing, I mean, it's so hard to tell nowadays. I don't know if I would advise someone to get on YouTube or try to find a band. I know for me, it was just a matter of playing with a bunch of musicians, and then one door just kind of led to another. I mean, to this day, I play in Darkest Hour, and that association came about because I'm friends with Taylor, who I mentioned a few minutes ago. And even though my time in Periphery, that came about because they added a band that Taylor and I were in on MySpace way back in the day. So it's a bit of luck, and it's a bit of just being prepared for when such opportunities arise. So it's hard for me to not speak in the abstract and put together some sort of definitive plan to be a success, because I don't think there is one. I think there's just so much left to chance that you just kind of have to, either take that for what it is, or while you're getting your music chops together, maybe formulate some sort of backup plan as well if you can't stomach failure, because
sure.
It doesn't always happen for everyone.
Yeah, there's lots of failure in the music business, no doubt about it, but that's the reason we keep trying, is because there are successes, and clearly you epitomize success. You've done some great things, and I really want to thank you for your time, for coming on the Drum Shuffle. We would love to have you back, when you get done with the Darkest Hour tour and you get your new release done. We would love to have you come back on and talk about those things. I would wish you tremendous success and good luck on your run of dates with Darkest Hour coming up here. But please come back and talk to us again in the future.
Thanks. I'd love to. Finite 2 will be out this year, and good luck to you with the Drum Shuffle.
I really appreciate that, Travis. Folks, we're going to let Travis go. Travis, good luck out there on the run, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you. See you later.
All right. See you, Travis. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that's going to do it for episode 3 of the Drum Shuffle. Huge thanks to Travis Orbin for joining us. Please go check out Darkest Hour as they're out on the road when they come through your area. Also like to ask you, please give us a rating or review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever service you're using to tune in. And please keep your questions, comments, and any suggestions for the show coming. We can be reached at thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find me over at jamieeads.com. So until next week, may your heads stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers!